2,500 beers, and 3,000 spirits. More at TotalWine.com.
12:06 now on KUOW 94.9. Time for Week in Review. Here's Bill Radke.
Oh, welcome to Friday. Welcome to the Week in Review. And we get to come together and discuss what happened this week, what it all means. My name is Bill Radke. If you see me this weekend lying underneath your car, I'm not stealing your catalytic converter. I just needed some shade. Normally, actually, I would be stealing your catalytic converter, but it's too hot to do anything that strenuous. You can watch this program if you go to YouTube or Facebook. You search for KUOW Public Radio. And I'm so happy to have my guest today, Q13 reporter Jennifer Lee. Good to see you again. Welcome back on.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So nice to be on here.
You tweeted out some ways to beat the heat, Jennifer, which I know those two words rhyme with each other, but it sounds exhausting. Can I just avoid the heat or counter or sleep through the heat?
I know you're already like tired from the heat and then you're also trying to beat it. Like, can you really win? It's exhausting. Yes.
That's my concern. It's great to have you here. Kitsap Sun military reporter Josh Farley. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you too.
Good to see you, Bill. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. I see you out under my car with the catalytic converter all weekend.
Yes, all weekend. Exactly. Josh, one thing we can say when it's 100 degrees is at least there's not an awful sewage stench coming from our local treatment plant. But that happened near you. Is it still, what happened? Is it still stenching?
No, it's
Good.
better. But basically the entire, with the shortage, with this power problem at a plant in Longview, it's reverberated to public works facilities around the state, and Bremerton, the city that I live in, relies on sodium hypochlorite for not only treating water, treating wastewater, it goes into, ultimately into Puget Sound, but also for odor control of the plant. So local officials here had to debate, well, what are we going to preserve first? Obviously, drinking water is going to be a higher priority, as is protecting the environment, and odor control had to go by the wayside for a hot minute.
Okay, but that's better. But what about Fountain Park? Is that open for?
That is not open. That is not open now. And I'm hearing that's a problem around, that's something that's necessary to make sure kids are safe and that the fountains are disinfected. Our fountains are currently closed. They're right by the Bremerton Ferry Terminal. Unfortunately, on what is going to be perhaps the most sweltering weekend in Puget Sound history, perhaps, there's going to be no fountains, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there was a sewage spill off of Des Moines as well in the Sound. Also with a Seattle Channel producer and host, Brian Callanan. Great to see you again, Brian. How's it smell where you are?
Not too bad, Bill. It's the sweet smell of summer vacation so far. Early part of it, but the temperatures are super hot. So try to stay out from underneath those cars so nobody reports you on those catalytic converters, please.
Yeah, I think that's best. 95 maybe tomorrow. Maybe over 100 Sunday and Monday. In fact, I just saw at the Seattle Weather blog the latest model showing Seattle could approach 110 degrees on Monday, and the all-time heat record is 103. For any of you knowing, like, let's say you're new to this area, and we realize that other places get multiple 100-degree days, but it does not happen here.
Those of us at the National Weather Service in Seattle have never seen forecast data like this before. We urge everyone to make plans now to check on and ensure our loved ones, neighbors, pets, and our entire community remain safe over the coming week.
And in a way, if you're lucky, you can have fun with a heat wave, right? We talk about, splashing in a pool and all that, but I'm normal upbeat things, but I'm curious how you all are feeling. I think this is the first time a single short-term weather forecast made me feel sad and worried because it's so extreme, and obviously climate change is the big context. Am I just a buzzkill here, or are you all kind of feeling a little bit gloomy?
No, I definitely know what you're talking about here, Bill, and I just kind of look at it as another record-breaking event like so many we've had in the past couple of years here. You think about February of 2019, the snowiest month we'd had in 50 years in Seattle. That happened. Then the pandemic hit a year later, and then we had all the smoke from those fires in the later part of 2020 there. Now we got this major heat wave. I just think about it, and in very real terms, our region is just not well set up for events like this. I mean, less than half of us, the stats show, actually have some sort of air conditioning. And I know the city is trying to do what it can in terms of the different heat relief areas there. You've got 13 air-conditioned public library branches. Make sure you hit those up. You got the wading pools, the spray parks. You got lifeguarded beaches too. It's very alarming to have this kind of weather this early in the season, and I'm just hopeful that people are trying to be careful out there.
Yeah. I would add that, this is particularly a matter of life and death for vulnerable populations. You go back to February, and most people think about the Texas power outages, for instance. That was very different weather occurring, but in terms of what took place, estimates range, but about 150 plus people died from that. And when you have the kind of draws that we're going to experience on our power grid, for those who do have air conditioning, all this stuff really adds up. And so I just echo Brian that, you got to stay cool. There's hopefully places that you can stay cool, and it's scary. It's not just that it's really hot. It's that it's, for some people, this could be fatal.
Yeah, totally agree with Brian and Josh and what they've had to say. I mean, when you reach over 100 degrees and you don't have access to even shade, if you're just exposed to the sunlight, I mean, that can be damaging in so many ways. Obviously, the most extreme being death, but I mean, people really need to remember to put on sunblock. They also need to hydrate well in advance. Seriously, start drinking water now. And also just make sure that you're watching out for, your pets, your children, maybe your older parents or relatives who may not be as able to take care of themselves. And, I thought it was also interesting when the city of Seattle put out information, resources for the homelessness population. And they talked about a 24-hour emergency shelter that's available at Fisher Pavilion at Seattle Center. It's run by the Salvation Army. Meals will be provided. It all sounds great, but it can only accommodate up to 73 people. And I think we're all aware that our homeless population is above that number. So, just kind of thinking about all of the people who are going to be exposed to the heat this weekend. And, even for myself, my building luckily rents out air conditioning units. And last summer I did rent one, and I really felt like, I didn't need one. And I didn't rent one for this summer until I saw the forecast several days ago. So now I have air conditioner.
Yeah, I don't have AC. That's why if you watch this online on YouTube or Facebook, I'm in the dark because I'm doing what I can to shut things down. But I'm very lucky in that I think this reminds me of the pandemic, that I think that I'm going to be uncomfortable, but I think I'm going to be okay. And but depending on your situation, it's tough to be elderly at any time. Poor neighborhoods tend to be hotter, more uncomfortable in many ways. Neighborhoods in the Puget Sound area that are more Black and brown people are more hit. It's just the inequity of it is reminding me of coronavirus.
And it makes me think too, Bill, about the amount of people that are going to be jumping in the water over the next several days here. Always happens this time of year, very early in the season. People might be getting into fast moving water, things of that nature. Even though it might be that kind of temperature outside, 100 degrees or whatever else, Puget Sound is not going to be anywhere above 50 degrees in terms of the water there. So that's one place I know people are going to be trying to beat the heat. They need to be careful there because it can affect you in terms of your body temperature there. And some of our rivers around the area. I know this always happens in the early season and it can be tragic, but if you're not sure about where you're going in, if you're not wearing a personal flotation device, you really need to be careful with that stuff because this early season part of it is the most scary for me. If this were in the middle of the season when things were warmed up a bit for a longer period of time, that'd be one thing, but we've got some cold water temperatures out there that could cause a lot of trouble over the next few days.
True. And just to reiterate, Heat Islands, the Seattle Times had a story showing King County, basically these areas that are more dense, that have more pavement. I was kind of thinking to myself, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Maybe just the road to hell is paved, period, right? We're talking 2 to 20 degrees hotter in these areas. That means you're going to be using more air conditioning. I know that the state Department of Ecology, other counties, they have incentives for pulling up pavement, adding trees. That's all good stuff. But we still live in a city, even as progressive as Seattle is, we just tore down a waterfront viaduct, added a tunnel underneath, and in some places the new waterfront is going to have like eight lanes, I think. So we're still adding pavement. By the way, I-5 South through Soto this weekend. There's paving going on, and I just want to give a shout out to the workers. How on earth they're going to be running hot asphalt on triple digit day in Seattle. I feel for those folks.
Maybe they could put a pause on that project. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point.
I almost feel like you'd have to, because I really think that puts people in danger. I mean, like Josh was saying, like the sun really just absorbs on that asphalt and will reflect right back on people. So totally agree.
There are burn bans in parts of unincorporated King, Pierce County, Mason County, but you can still use your barbecue grill, and campground fire pits are still okay. I don't know what other burning anyone was planning to do.
There's one thing I'm thinking about, Bill, in leading up to July 4th. I know it happens in my neighborhood. People start getting excited about fireworks and light them off early. I'm very hopeful that people are not going to be doing that this year. It really is dry out there, and people need to be aware of that in metro areas like Seattle too. Oh, it's plenty damp around here. It might not be in your neighborhood. So I'm hopeful people are careful about that too, because that celebration, if you will, with fireworks, which are illegal in the city of Seattle limits, they can cause a lot of big problems out there.
Yeah, to add to that, I had a conversation with Seattle Fire on Sunday. So in the last several days, these numbers may have changed, but starting from Memorial Day onward, there had apparently been 7 water rescue incidents that firefighters, first responders went out to. But in fact, brush fire incidents were well over 20 in that same period. So Seattle Fire was also saying that it's extremely dry out there right now.
Yeah, come on over here to Navy country here in Kitsap County. There are people that really like their fireworks as well, and I'll tell you, they're not waiting past June 25th today. We've already been hearing them in my neighborhood. So
yeah, I'm just not used to thinking about fire danger so presently in Western Washington. Thinking about a spark from starting a car on the strip, the dry strip in front of the house, or from a barbecue grill. I'm just, again, I've lived here. People who are here from someplace else are probably better versed in this stuff, but you got to understand for locals, it's kind of it's a relatively new thing, just relatively. I saw that a couple of malls, Pacific Place Mall and Northgate Station, have discounts to lure people into their air-conditioned spaces.
Yeah.
Maybe just a sign that says air-conditioned spaces, but
unlimited popcorn. Unlimited
yeah.
popcorn at the AMC at Pacific Place. I'll meet you there, Bill.
Yeah, wherever the air conditioning is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what else? What are you guys individually doing? I'm thinking, do I want to get up tomorrow pre-dawn and go to the lake with all the caveats in mind, being very careful, but I don't know. Are you doing anything differently because of the heat this weekend?
I just trying to stay careful with it and maybe stay out of the heat, which is difficult to do the things that I want to do in the early part or the later part of the day. That's been my usual MO at this time.
On the hottest forecasted days, which are Sunday and Monday right now, I'm actually going to be working. So I'm already thinking ahead about like my ice packs, like getting all of them out into, my lunch bag that's insulated, bringing extra water. Obviously, something that has electrolytes will probably be helpful. Fresh fruit that's super juicy, things like that. So just thinking ahead to what the workday could bring with the heat.
Yeah. Likewise, I have a forest trail clearing little operation that we do on the weekends normally at the end of the month, and that's about early morning hours. Going to take care of that, and then probably throw a pack of ice on my neck and ride it out.
Yep.
Yeah, shade it, drink it, cool it. Check on your friends and neighbors, especially folks getting on in years. Just make sure all of us are okay. Okay, let's take a pause here on Week in Review. That's sort of just the weather kind of is the news right now, but we've got other stuff to talk about too. The state is fixing to reopen, but the eviction moratorium rolls on. We'll talk about that and more when we return on Week in Review. We're on YouTube and Facebook. You can watch the show. We've got Jennifer Lee, Brian Callanan here, Josh Farley, and we'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Isolde Raftery, online managing editor at KUOW. I want to tell you about a new newsletter we have, Today So Far. Today So Far brings you a quick, informal look at the news. Sometimes we even make jokes or tell you regional trivia for you to share on your Zoom happy hour later, like where Seattle crows go to roost at night. Give it a try by subscribing at kuow.org/today.
1222 on KUOW 94.9 and back to Week in Review with Bill Radke.
Bill Radke here with Josh Farley, Brian Callanan, and Jennifer Lee, bringing you the Week in Review. And there are something like 200,000 renters in this state who are behind on their rent payments. This week, Governor Jay Inslee extended the eviction moratorium through September 30th at least. It was going to expire next week.
We hardly want to see a wave of homelessness follow the end of this moratorium on June 30th. We don't want to have success reopening our businesses and then see a wave of homelessness. So we think that was the goal. I believe we will achieve it.
Brian, the governor said more time is needed to get rental assistance programs up and running. Why is that taking so long? There's certainly a lot of government money being spent.
True, and there's been a few different holdups at the King County level. That's been a big issue. Mainly what they're trying to do there is set up databases such that they can record who needs the money, where the money's going out. That's been an issue, a continual issue for that side of things, at least at that level. At the state level, the state did approve putting a lot of money into this in terms of relief for renters and for landlords out there, a $658 million package in the spring when they wrapped up their session. That budget goes into effect, though, on July 1st. So there's some timing issues here. And so just distributing that money is going to take some time here. The hope is that they will get that money out by July 15th. At that point, early August, people will be able to start paying their rent there. They'll repay that rent and hopefully start paying in full by the beginning of August there. But I would have to say that the same issues that exist for renters and landlords right now could be staring us in the face in the fall. So we'll have to see how this plays out over the next several weeks. It's that distribution of money, that choke point there, that's the big issue for the state and King County.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with the governor's logic there, that we're already in a housing crisis, an affordability crisis, and the idea of many more people being pushed onto the streets is terrible. That said, we saw this week also Republican pushback, a legislator on Kitsap Peninsula with here, Republican Michelle Caldera of Port Orchard, basically saying this is overreach. They have banged that drum against Governor Inslee most of the pandemic, of course, and basically saying that legislature had kind of thought of this and and made provisions for this in bills that had already passed. So a lot of give and take there.
I've had conversations this week with Sue McCarthy with the Dispute Resolution Center for King County, and there actually has been a landlord-tenant dispute resolution team established in King County for some time. So, I mean, the team is adequately trained. I'd imagine that they probably need to bring on more people by just, the volume of people who are probably going to have to seek this route. In order to even qualify for some of those funds that will be available starting July 1st. But it was interesting just to hear about how, this team is highly skilled in conflict coaching. That's if, let's say a tenant just wanted tips on how they can approach their landlord, or even mediation where, they bring the landlord and tenant together for that conversation with, a mediator in that mix. And, just to remind people, I mean, this can be such a traumatic experience for both parties. I mean, if you are a tenant who is behind months and months on rent, that's thousands of dollars, and you're literally on the verge of losing housing. And also, unlike the landlord's end, we're not just talking about these, mega landlords with huge buildings, lots of money to spare, but a lot of these landlords are basically like small mom pop landlords. So obviously their wallets have definitely just been tied through all of this as well. So just something to think about with this whole process.
Yeah, and just following up on what Jennifer's talking about, it's not that aid has not gone out there, Bill. From what I've seen from the state level here, $500 million has already been released. The governor's office says this has actually provided assistance to 80,000 renters and landlords. It's just as this rent, the back rent continues to accumulate, it turns into a bigger and bigger problem. The state's estimating it's something like 1.1 or 1.2 billion dollars in back rent that still needs to be paid here. So there is some money there. It is getting distributed, but this is something that's going to continue to grow in terms of political pressure, as Josh was talking about here over the next several months. And in looking at this, you think about it in terms of the history of it, this marks the fourth time the state has moved the goalposts, if you will, on the moratorium here. And so we're going to see more pressure from landlord groups. We're going to see more legal pressure too. We're going to see more pressure from within the legislature. And I think it's this whole question of, as we emerge from the pandemic, it's going to be a messy process here. And certainly there are going to be some issues with renters and landlords here. It really does indicate to me, though, with these different issues, with the different legal challenges that could come out of this, this could be the last time we see this moratorium extended. We'll have to see about that, but that's what I see indicated from the tea leaves that I'm reading.
How has the state decided whether and when to pay renters versus pay property owners? The renters have their rent obligations, the property owners have their property taxes, mortgage obligations. How has the state figured out what's the best way to help everybody who needs to meet their obligations?
Well, it's kind of a both and, as I've seen it, Bill. They are trying to help out both parties there in terms of different pots of money that are available. So there are some dollars there. The issue is the way it's distributed. It's almost a lottery type of system. So you've got some people that may have applied for relief last fall. They continue to check in with the state, and it's not this week, and it's not this week. So I think there are a lot of people out there that are trying to do the right thing in terms of applying for aid or whatever else. And I'm talking about landlords and I'm talking about renters here. It's just that distribution piece has been difficult. This quasi lottery system that's involved right now to get that money out there is a bit of an issue too. I heard from someone that has been working in this distribution system over the last couple of months. And really, you think about it, it's a difficult thing to manage here. They describe it as building a plane at 30,000 feet. They haven't been through this before. They're trying to get this money out as quickly as possible. But with some of these different time deadlines, especially with the state budget going into effect in July, it's made for some very difficult, sticky places here, I guess, where it's been difficult for landlords and renters to get the money they need.
And the moratorium goes until the end of September, the eviction moratorium. But starting in August, renters are supposed to pay back what they owe, or if they can't, make an arrangement with the landlord, or else the landlord can start to initiate that eviction process, and that eviction could take place starting October 1st. Is that the idea?
That's what I've heard from the state, and I think they are trying to really point towards this idea of starting to really shift that responsibility back to this contractual agreement between the landlord and the tenant there. And I think that the more that is out of the state's hands, and hopefully once money gets into the renters and landlords' hands, they're able to figure this out. I think looking at that bright line of a date of August 1st, in the hopes that more aid is able to get out there, is going to help them move past this. But it's really until they get those contracts settled. And I mean, you think about it, these are landlords that have signed pieces of paper from these tenants saying, we're going to pay this or whatever else. So you wanted to try to revert back to that level and let the business kind of even itself out over the next couple of months.
Okay, let's talk about some other aspects of pandemic reopening. The state of Washington is supposed to fully reopen next week. The US-Canada border is still closed, which is hard for any border town, but man, nowhere like Point Roberts, Washington. Has anyone here been there to Point Roberts? I have not myself been, but it's a peninsula. It's a British Columbia peninsula just south of Vancouver. It's basically Canada, except a long time ago, the US and Britain settled a border dispute. by slicing off the very bottom of the peninsula for the USA. That's Point Roberts. It's 5 square miles. And now with the border closed, it's cut off from Canada. And it's, of course, it's cut off from the US mainland by water. There's only one grocery store. They say that they're going to have to close. And Governor Inslee says this is so frustrating.
With these numbers of vaccinated people, I just see no reason why we can't, at least for vaccinated people, get this border open. It's very disappointing to me. And so we will continue to be as aggressive as possible. We have some allies in Canada, although it's not universal. There are some provincial premiers who are not in favor of reopening the border, even to vaccinated people, as I understand it. I regret that. And I think in the northern tier of governors in the United States, I think there's pretty good chorus, certainly members of Congress, who want to open up this border.
Josh, any idea what can be done? What's going to happen next?
Yeah, good question. Well, we did see some movement this week. The government of Canada has said that to this point, it's a 14-day quarantine. If you're going back as a Canadian resident, that's going to be, of course, if you can show that you are fully vaccinated. We're seeing maybe the beginnings of a softening. And so that certainly could be viewed as progress. No tourism, of course, through at least, I think it's July 21st. But I would also point out, you think about the difference in how our countries have weathered the COVID-19 pandemic and how the vaccinations have gone. United States, so plentiful here, you can get a free joint, for your shot, I think. And in Canada, of course, a more limited supply. So they really tried to push, having everyone get that first shot, and then we'll sort of, I think, see what happens. So Canada has actually leapfrogged the United States and many other countries. There's like 2/3 of the country have at least one shot, but in terms of full vaccination, they're behind us. It's like only like 20%, I think, maybe not even 20%. So definitely, some caution there. We saw this week, if you're a hockey fan, you might have seen that the coach of the Montreal Canadiens, they finally allowed for essentially the entire NHL season. I know everybody's excited with Seattle Kraken coming here. The entire season they were playing, the teams north of the border played each other and the teams south played each other. Well, finally, Montreal came to Vegas, and what happened? The coach of the Montreal Canadiens, sadly, contracted or posted, had positive tests. So it's tricky, this is tricky. And so you can kind of understand it when you see it from that point. Meanwhile, in the middle here, as the fire chief of Point Bob points out, like they're under citizen's arrest pretty much. They're losing their grocery store. I mean, it's just awful. It's just awful for those folks.
I remember reading an article about a golf course at Point Roberts as well that basically had most of their clients coming through the border from Canada. So yeah, totally. How do you survive when you're cut off?
And
Bill,
Inslee
I think you and I get on a rowboat. Let's take care of this.
We're going to get on a boat.
Yeah, we could pack some supplies. Let's do it.
Let's do this. Let's help. Yeah, the governor says he says I can't do anything about this. This is a federal issue, and you did not vote me in as the president of the United States.
Right.
All right. Well, I hope somebody can help out the folks there. It just seemed to be completely strapped in Point Roberts while the border is still closed. We're talking about the news of the week with Kitsap Sun military reporter Josh Farley, Seattle Channel producer and host Brian Callanan, Q13 reporter Jennifer Lee, and we are going to take another short break, and we're going to talk about a different kind of reopening as the city of Seattle tries to say we're open for business, and here's what we're going to do about it. Stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from Earth Justice, a nonprofit environmental law organization fighting for justice for all people and the planet. Earth Justice, because the earth needs a good lawyer.
It's 12:35 on KUOW 94.9, and the sentencing hearing of former police officer Derek Chauvin is now underway in the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And Chauvin himself, surprisingly, just gave a very brief statement before the court. We'll get an update on that coming up from NPR News at 1 o'clock. Right now, though, back to Week in Review. Here's Bill Radke.
Week in Review here on KUOW Seattle. Good to have you along with us. I'm in the dark. I kind of like it. I'm getting used to it. The visuals, because we're putting this show up as we always do on YouTube and Facebook. You just search KUOW Public Radio. Next time I just might turn. I've got the blinds closed to keep out the heat. I might just turn off the light as well. I may turn off my computer, which is probably generating heat. But that may impair the quality of the program. So you'll be forewarned.
The Boutique Theater with Bill. I love it. All right.
I do look spooky right now. Okay, so continuing with the news of the week, City of Seattle and private partners are investing more than $16 million into the downtown core, going toward a series of live events, trash cleanup, connecting people who are homeless to housing. Here is Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin.
This summer, we're also going to be addressing some of our empty storefronts to see how we can get more pop-ups, more cool, vibrant businesses, to bring more small business owners of color into our downtown core so that we can really be a city for everyone.
Jennifer, what was your reaction to what's working against downtown Seattle and what they're trying to do about it?
Well, one question that I had is, of course, the pandemic just limited so many of our personal abilities as well as, just city government abilities. And everyone had to, use the utmost caution during that early period. But why didn't they do something sooner? So many of the small business owners who were struggling during that period were crying out for help. And also with the, homelessness issue in downtown right now, I wonder why those people weren't moved to safer spaces sooner as well. Of course, if you ask why now, yes, the state is reopening next week. So the timing of it is understandable, but I still kind of have those questions of why wasn't really anything that could be seen as, drastic help done sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this process happen now, Bill. And I think that overall, you're seeing a good partnership between the mayor and the Downtown Seattle Association, 16.4 million getting pumped in there. And I think what they're trying to do is try to bring some more activity downtown. You've got this along with some new investments of federal relief money to activate the space. You hear that phrase a lot here. The hope is to make this more welcoming for tourists. And also there will be some more options for people who are homeless, try to get them off the street and into shelter or whatever else. So I think we're seeing a lot of this happen right now. I don't think downtown is dead. I think a lot of people have talked about that over the past couple months, but we've seen some reports. I saw a report in the Seattle Times about this recently. Demand for office space is actually happening at rates beyond pre-pandemic levels. So there's definitely a desire to be back downtown for a lot of these different businesses or whatever else. Can the city, can downtown partners there help turn the corner there such that when June 30th happens, we're going to be able to welcome a lot more people downtown? I hope so, for the sake of downtown, because if you're downtown, if you've been there over the past couple of months here, it really does look like a ghost town. So some new activity, some new life getting pumped in is going to be really important for that area.
Yeah, I would echo Jennifer and Brian. Coming over on the ferry, it's great to be back in Seattle. It's great to be able to get back into the big city. But, cities really like Seattle, Portland, and others really enjoyed such a renaissance, I feel like, in much of my lifetime, and just seeing so much more activity. And the pandemic, as one of many issues, sort of took the life out of it. And this may seem too little too late, but I think better late than never as far as any kind of an effort to really that gathering place, bring people out. We're just seeing it's almost like this hibernation that we've all been in with COVID. And we're really seeing that, I think, not just in the big cities, but in smaller cities around Puget Sound as well.
Yeah, and I think just one more piece on this, Bill. I think the city of Seattle has taken its time in some ways to put a plan like this together, to Jennifer's point earlier. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but I know there's been a lot of work, at least within the city council and the different districts that are there, to make sure that money for relief from COVID or whatever else is distributed equitably, which is super important. But you've got a downtown core that needs a little extra attention. I think that's what they're trying to bring to the table now.
Mm-hmm. I just want to put this out there. I love Seattle. And, before the pandemic, one of my favorite things after having moved here was to have visitors come by. And I actually had my first visitor from out of town last weekend. As soon as she landed, I told her so much about, all of the things that excite me about this city. But I also felt like I had to put out that disclaimer about some of the sites that she would land upon when we were going through downtown. With that being said, she loved the city, but she was definitely surprised by, some of the negatives that we're all seeing when we go downtown, whether it's, the garbage, the trash, the homelessness that's on full display, of course, just a lot of empathy for the people dealing with that too. But on a positive note, we were walking through Pike Market, and, anyone who loves Pike Market and goes there often, you get to know different vendors and people. And I was having a conversation with socios, fruit and the produce.
Yeah.
Yes. And they were saying that Friday, which would have been last Friday, was probably the busiest foot traffic they have seen through the market. So, I have faith in downtown Seattle and also all of the locations that we all, love so much. And, I do think it's going to take a lot of work, though.
Well, speaking of city responses, how is that Compassion Seattle charter amendment proposal coming along? Brian, I think you were, we're all sort of following.
Everybody's been keeping an eye on this. Yeah, so this was a deal where there are a number of people from the DSA, the Downtown Seattle Association, and also in combination with some other groups, including some social outreach networks there. They put together this charter amendment proposal, and they've been gathering signatures on it. Now, it would actually prescribe what the city would spend on homelessness on a yearly basis. It would also require that public areas be kept clear. And first and foremost, it would require that affordable housing and services be ramped up immediately. So there's a lot of pressure behind this. Compassion Seattle had put it upon itself, the campaign put it upon itself to actually have signatures, 33,000 signatures in place by today, June 25th. I've checked with the campaign. They said so far so good to me very recently. I don't know if we're going to have an announcement on that very soon, but their hope is get these signatures in at the end of June, have everything checked out by the start of August, at which point King County elections could put that on a November ballot, where they're expecting a lot of activity with the different council races and the mayor races that we have out there in the city of Seattle. I think they have a lot of concern out there that this is an issue that certainly a lot of people are tuned into. It was in 2019. It was before that. It's been an issue for many, many years. And certainly, as with so many different things, I think the problem of homelessness has been laid bare with the pandemic. We've seen the inequity. We've seen it on our streets, and that visible side of homelessness has only grown over the course of the pandemic. So they're working on a response to this. We're getting close to that deadline in terms of the self-imposed deadline to bring in those signatures. So we'll see very, very soon if Compassion Seattle is able to make its way on the ballot. It has certainly been a bellwether for a lot of the candidates that are running right now. Do you oppose this? Do you support this, et cetera? So we're going to see a lot more details on this in the next couple of weeks.
And Jennifer, there was a fatal fire recently in a homeless encampment. We've got the park next to the county courthouse. People are talking about maybe condemning that park. Can you fill us in a little more about what's been going on lately?
Yeah, so in the Mount Baker neighborhood, I believe it was on June 14th, so over a week ago, and there was an encampment fire, and it was in a green belt of Mount Baker, so an area that's usually just, trees, natural brush to kind of separate neighborhoods to infrastructure or business districts. And there was a fatal fire at an encampment. 2 people ended up dying, and my photographer, Andy Anderson, actually went down into the brush. And when you take a look at what was left behind, you could see that it was an elaborate makeshift home setup. So it was pallets and tarps, and it literally looked like an outline of, let's say, a 2-bedroom apartment. So obviously these people are probably staying there for a very long time, but it's just so dangerous. And I actually ended up speaking with the center director of a local preschool who's down the hill from there, because just this week, there was a deadly shooting at the bus stop right by the preschool. So obviously there's just a lot of trauma happening specifically with that area. And the center director was just saying that they really need help, and they've been reaching out to city leaders just to see what kind of action can be taken. But she said it's just happening too slow in relation to all of the events that are unfolding. And just talking about crime in recent months and recent weeks, not just here but across the country, there just seems to be such a surge. And one of my other colleagues, Olivia Lavoie, went to that Rainier Valley shooting that just happened a couple days ago. And I think the latest stat from SPD said that there were over 200 shootings in the city of Seattle so far. And it just seems like such a high number.
Yeah, I was following that as well. I think we're seeing a pretty dramatic rise in violent crime across the country and in big cities, not just any crime, but violent crime. And so you start to wonder how sort of what's the policy response in our cities and our states. I'm from the Portland area, and one thing, I've obviously followed down there. There was under 400 shootings in 2019. I think they're on pace this year for something like 1,000. Of course, we're not even to July yet, but if you project it out, it's a lot more is the bottom line. And there's obviously a big debate on how we do that, and we're trying to have this conversation, of course, about how we rethink policing, how we rethink our community response and public safety. But one of the things that happened in Portland that's been noted is that the mayor there, Ted Wheeler, disbanded the police's, I think it was called I have it written here, the gun violence reduction team. And, the police would say, well, you took away a tool that we can use to reduce those kinds of things. But at the same time, the mayor did that because they looked like they were being heavy-handed in particularly to people of color. And so, how do we address that? How do we sort of bridge this? I don't know, but that's certainly going to be a discussion for the months to come as we see these numbers really escalating.
And it's certainly been an issue for the Seattle Police Department. Just to echo what Josh and Jennifer are saying, I think we've heard a lot from Interim Police Chief Diaz in our city of Seattle here that as these events start to creep up, he's losing a lot of officers, certainly has over the past year in the course of the pandemic, in the course of the riots that were happening around the murder of George Floyd. I think there's a point right now where you're seeing a lot of these different public safety departments, these police departments out there, really trying to rethink how they deploy their resources here. Because as Josh was saying, there's only so many teams that you can put out there. Sometimes you can prevent these events and sometimes you can't. So I think the city is scrambling a little bit right now in terms of its coverage for police officers, while at the same time trying to figure out these different community solutions too, which are equally as important. So we're in a very interesting flux here as we emerge from the pandemic when it comes to public safety.
Before we leave downtown Seattle's hopes for revitalization, Josh, you were mentioning that downtowns outside of Seattle, little downtowns across Western Washington, are having some good times.
I think so. Let's put it this way. I don't think that everybody is going to be telecommuting forever. I say this, of course, sitting in my basement here in Bremerton, but I think that there will be a push to get back to the office, but there may be there's certainly the pandemic changed everything in this regard and is keeping people home, but it doesn't disassociate, it doesn't disconnect them from wanting that social interaction of being in a downtown. There's a reason people love that and they flock to that. Here in Bremerton, where I am, up in north of me in Paulsbo, a great little downtown to walk. People love that. On Winslow on Bainbridge Island. And I was surprised, I'll be quite honest with you. My wife and I drove through Shelton in Mason County, west of Olympia, not exactly what some people would refer to as a thriving cosmopolis or anything. I really I am fond of Shelton, frankly, but I noticed for the very first time Railroad Avenue, their main drag, there's quite a few shops. There's lots of activity. People, and I've never seen anything like that for Little Shelton. So I do think that people are really craving this, and they'll find a way. And maybe because we're more spread out now, maybe it's something that in the future that's something that will be more sustainable. Is the little downtown, not just the big one.
Yeah, it feels like we're appreciating the chance to come together. We've had a new appreciation for what the opportunity to come together can mean. Okay, well, let's talk about Seattleites coming together at Pride this weekend, and a little back and forth there, and we'll give you a reason to smile, as we always do. We've got Josh Farley here from Kitsap Sun, Brian Callanan from Seattle Channel, and Jennifer Lee from Q13, and we will be right back. This is Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. You can watch the show at Facebook and YouTube and follow what's happening. There are a whole lot of Seattle Pride events this weekend, including the Capitol Hill Pride March and Rally. But the Seattle City Council president canceled her appearance there, and so have other guest speakers. Who can describe what this Pride controversy is about?
There's a lot happening with this one. I know that there was a different event that was planned down at Jimi Hendrix Park, Bill, and those organizers down there were asking for donations for their event. They called them reparations fees because they're really trying to support BIPOC community members there and doing that. There was some pushback from the Cap Hill Pride group that were saying, wait a minute, that doesn't seem fair that they're doing this in what they call the reverse discrimination type of way.
To make clear, this is the Taking Black Pride event that's calls itself a Black and Brown Queer and Trans-centered event. And they said everybody is welcome, but their white allies will be charged a reparations fee of $10 to $50, which the Capitol Hill Pride organizers reacted to.
Yeah, and they charge these, I don't know if it's a charge of a fee as much as it is a donation bill. And I think that some people have blown this out of proportion. It's certainly become politicized, which is unfortunate here. I think what has gone on is all these different events rely on donations to really keep going here. So this fee, if you want to call it that, was charged last year too. People paid it and it wasn't that big of a deal. For a lot of folks, they're really trying to support some different communities here. I think Cap Hill Pride jumped in here and was trying to do its own thing to make sure that things were equitable. And that's the bottom line that I see here. These are two groups of many groups that are trying to fight for the same thing, which is equity for people that are LGBTQ. And I'm hopeful that rather than adding more political fuel to the fire, that this can lead to a better discussion after this weekend and hopefully into the future, that these are events that are trying to push things in the right direction. And when there's a competition within the movement, if you want to call it that, it can lead to a lot of different challenges.
Yeah, I think I echo Brian completely. I mean, I think this was the kind of thing where it was more of a donation blown out of proportion. And the real point of all this, of course, that it has been for years is that this celebration that we have, the LGBTQ plus community, you don't want to overshadow that too, but at the same time, raising those community donations is a good thing. And hopefully, it'll just be about that come this weekend.
I'm really glad that both Brian and Josh clarified that, because I think I was one of those people who kind of read it in the politicized write-up, if that makes sense, because I wasn't familiar with the group Taking Black or Back Pride with the event. And for me, I simply read it as reparation fee, but, just to kind of hear that clarification about how it was a way to, take donations and support. I think that definitely is a different way of just kind of explaining what's actually happening with the event. I also had a conversation with Seattle Pride, a third organization. Like Bill said, there are so many different groups who are celebrating and also educating this weekend. And this organization is actually holding a virtual event again this year. They understand people probably want to be out and celebrating, but I think it's just another way. You can still go out to Capitol Hill to celebrate and also take part in some of those in-person events. You can also just hop online, and even on Saturday night, they're having this event for the first time that's called Pride After Dark. It is virtual. It's only for adults, so make sure your kids are in bed. And they are charging a $10, I believe it's a $10 event ticket fee, but it should be a lot of fun. And there's going to be drag, burlesque, adult humor. So that's, another option for people looking for something fun for this Saturday night.
Good call. Thank you. And just to round that off, the Capitol Hill Pride organizers had said that this quote unquote reparations fee would violate anti-discrimination laws. There's a code against denying someone entrance, but I think, yes, I think this is a voluntary donation in effect. I don't think anybody's actually being denied entrance. And the Capitol Hill Pride organizers, they were chastened, they apologized, they said what you all said, that this is about unity and, and let's enjoy the Pride weekend. We've just got enough time to give listeners reason to walk away and smile here in the last couple of minutes. Week in review. Anything smile worthy?
I'll throw out there. I'm kind of happy about T-Mobile Park opening up 100% next week. July 2nd is the date. You don't need proof of vaccination, which you have needed to sit in different sections over the past couple months here. Masks only if you haven't been vaccinated. I'm excited about that because I never thought that the Mariners would be a couple games over 500 this point in the season. So go M's, make sure you check out some games and have fun out there.
I hope this is going to be their season too. And I'll just add that I've been loving all of the clear views and beautiful after photos from our amazing photographers of Mount Rainier. And I have to say the Puget Sound just looks extra sparkly these past several days. So just nature of, the Puget Sound and the mountains have been breathtaking.
And I'm thinking about, I've said it before, I'll say it again, hockey this fall in Seattle. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's also a vision of something really cold, and that's helping me and as we get to this heat. The other sort of, I guess my escape valve is run down the street and if necessary, jump into the Puget Sound right now. Puget Sound is about 60 degrees, I think, all throughout our area. So there you go, 60 degrees, just as long as hopefully there's not another sewer spill.
Indeed. I know you'll be careful. Please all be careful in the heat. We care about you. Check in on the other people you care about all around you. And I always smile when I get to see Josh Farley and Jennifer Lee and Brian Callanan from Kitsap Sun and Q13 and Seattle Channel. Thank you so much for being the Week in Review this week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
Bill.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. And thanks to you for tuning in. And thanks to our producers, Sarah Leibovitz and Alec Cowan. Thank you to Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu. They're the reason we are on social media and we're able to stream this live so you can watch the show on YouTube and Facebook. I'm Bill Radke. Always appreciate you tuning in. We'll do it again next week. Week in Review.